Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're back for part two of the defense from this game against the Jets. Joining me again is Gabe Ferguson. Gabe, how you doing?
Hey Ken, glad to be back with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always my pleasure. Gabe, great discussion in part one. Lots of stuff. Talked about a lot of individual players. Talked about Kyle Hamilton a little bit. I'm sure we're going to get in him a lot more in the second episode. We'll talk a little bit when we talked about the pass rush, about Mike Green and an increase in effectiveness there. We have some good numbers to provide here. Other topics you thought were key from that first episode?
I think one of the things we mentioned was just the Ravens' ability to bottle up the running game. It really helped them on the defensive side. They didn't let up any big explosive runs. Let up a couple of scrambles that was
Mhm.
maybe one of the pain points that allowed the Jets to convert some third downs. But aside from that, I think they held Brees Hall in check, and that helped them keep the Giants' defense or offense in check.
Yeah, I think that's
Jets.
a good point. There's nothing I could find about that game rush defense from this game that was anything less than very, very good. Tyrod Taylor had a good game relative to his opportunity set, but a lot of that was yak. So a lot of it's actually on the Ravens defense for failing to make some tackles, particularly Aloe Gilman missed another very big tackle in this game on a 40-yard pass play. So I think that's most what it is. Please go back and give that a listen if you have not already. I want to start off part two here, though. We were in the middle of talking about the pass rush, and we talked a little bit about numbers, which are very conservative, and Tyrod Taylor's effectiveness relative to the opportunity set, which was pretty darn good overall at plus 33, but a fair amount of that was on some yak. We didn't talk about deception yet. I want to start off this episode with that. They used 8 off-ball blitzes in this game, which is not terribly high, 0.26 per play. But those 6 plays, and it's because it's 2 doubles among those 8, had 4 pressures, 1 ball out quick, 1 ATS, and 57 net yards. So they still were kind of doing Tyrod I always make that mistake, a favor when they threw that at him because he averaged 11.4 yards per play. That's not right, is it? That should be a little bit less than 10 yards per play, 9.5 yards per play. But in any case, he was effective reading hot when they did blitz him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a vet. He's been around a long time. He knows where to find his hot read, and he knows how much time he has to get rid of the ball. He was also able to evade pressure, I think, decently well a couple of times,
Mhm.
and make a couple plays. So I mean, he still has that ability in the pocket that kind of like allowed him to have this extended career. So um, it it was one of those things that I was thinking the Ravens would do more of, especially considering how effective they were in the previous game. But again, there's a difference between playing rookie quarterbacks and a 15-year veteran.
By the way, I did think of one other thing that we talked about that first episode, which is really worth going back and listening to, was a discussion of whether or not would be replaced on a one-for-one basis by Humphrey if he were to miss time. Like, could you literally move Humphrey into a slot corner / will linebacker role? Same thing that basically Hamilton has been playing since week 6. Would that make sense for the Ravens in terms of continuing to get a lot of value out of the dime package and out of that slot corner role? And we're kind of musing about this because they played 5 standard nickel snaps. The very first one, Humphrey was in the at slot corner, came in and took down, I think it was Hall, but might have been Davis for a 1-yard run, a loss of 1, I should say, which was very Hamilton-like when we saw it happen. So I think Gabe and I were. I don't want to restate your position for you. Take words out of your mouth. But how would you feel about it if all of a sudden we did see Humphrey in exactly that role?
I I kind of think it's their best way of using the personnel that they have because I like Uzier on the outside. I think he's done a really good job,
Mhm.
and that allows you to kind of use Humphrey where I think he's better suited at this point of his career. He's good in the slot. He's good in run defense. He doesn't have necessarily the elite coverage ability that he had in his prime, and I think it allows you to utilize his ability to kind of you know get into the backfield, disrupt some plays. He's been a decent blitzer in years past, I think, and
Mhm.
I think he can do a lot of things when you're putting him there.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. And then I think about Keon Martin coming to the game in dime packages, where If we're talking about how it's running right now and they're really looking for a will linebacker, they may solve that problem other ways. They may decide that they want to keep Buchanan on the field. They may put Trenton Simpson in there at will in dime packages and use him kind of as a pass rusher. They may even put TJ Tampa in as a fourth corner in such situations. But I really like the idea of having Humphrey in there as a, the Hamilton position, the star position, if you want to call it that, or the slot corner who moves to dime. I just really like that. I think one of the bonuses you get is you get Keon Martin in there as well, and hopefully Martin will return this week. He's been a very big player the last couple of weeks for the Ravens. It's probably difficult to project as much positive as you've seen so far, just because he's been over the top positive in his last couple of games. But I'd still be excited to see him back at slot if they could get him there this week.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. He's taken every single opportunity that he's been given and run with it from the very start of training camp all the way through preseason when he's been on the field in the regular season. I mean, he was maybe thrown into the fire in the week where everybody got hurt, but that wasn't just him either. Everybody was hurt, so Ravens defense was not what it is now. I think as a role player in this defense, he's definitely someone who can make an impact.
Yeah, be very excited to see that happen. Okay, so we talked a little bit about off-ball blitzes, some other elements of deception. They stunted 5 times, 1.6 yards per play on those, 3 sacks. All the Ravens sacks came on stunts in only five plays that they stunted. We've been having this discussion kind of on a weekly basis is, are the Ravens stunting enough? So you got some quarterbacks who don't really completely understand it or read the field particularly well. And the Tyrod is probably a little bit better at that, but he can hold the football and he can take time to make decisions, which means your stunts have time to develop. Is this a time when Orr should be taking off the clamps that appear to be on the field in terms of stunts called on the field, as opposed to just the ones he directs to occur?
I think it's one of those things where it needs to be in the right time and place. And there's certain things that a stunt can allow happen in the wrong down distance. Because if it's like third and medium, a
Mhm.
stunt can allow a quarterback to step up and scramble for a first down quite easily, because it does open up a lane. So if they're seeing it develop in front of them, it can be damaging, because by definition you're losing like you're kind of contained. Um,
Mhm.
some of the stunts the Ravens have run when they've actually brought pressure, I think maybe like brought an extra blitzer can be a little bit better in those situations because then you're occupying another gap. But it is a little bit risky to do it too much. But then again, it also depends on I think on the offensive line, and how well they are or how good they are at picking it up. Because a lot of the times, if an offensive line is struggling, that can be a great way to kind of just
Mhm.
continue to win easy reps and get an easy quick pressure.
Yeah, if you're mixing it with simulated pressure too, occasionally that's a really good time to try it because it seems like all the exits are guarded from the quarterback's perspective. I mean, he certainly the exit that's not guarded is the hot read when you have some pressure on because they have to your guys at the line of scrimmage, they have to drop out to cover and they have to get there pretty quickly, which usually puts them at a big disadvantage, particularly if they have to drag a seam or cover any kind of route that goes do a deeper drop for the underneath coverage player. But I'm seeing the results kind of week after week in the stunts. It just seems like they're not doing enough of them, if anything. And there's 2 ways to increase them. You can increase them by calling more from the sideline, or you can call more from the field.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
Yeah, and just one more point on the stunts as well. Not all stunts are created equal. If you kind of look at the film, look at the end zone views, the Ravens have done an extremely good job of executing them properly, of
yeah.
using the leverage of the looping players, of essentially picking an offensive lineman and
Yeah.
allowing the looper to come through essentially unblocked. And they've gotten a lot of really clean pressures out of that. And this game sacks, which is great to see.
Is the pick from Kyle Hamilton, which was I'm forgetting if it was against Minnesota or against Cleveland, but I think it might have been against Cleveland because it's the same game that he had the spin move for a sack
Mhm.
right through the A gap. But he also set a pick on the I guess it was it might have been the center and the running back actually they set it on, and that allowed a nice clean run for a quarterback hit, I believe, by Van Noy on that play. I love the fact that it doesn't have to be a specific type of player who sets the pick. A lot of times, it's the underneath player who drives a big advantage from that. So you do want to get a bigger guy, and Draymond Jones is like a really good size for doing that kind of thing. And Travis Jones is probably even better in terms of getting a big player. The Ravens had lots of guys in the past who could set the picks extremely well. Tim Jernigan, really great underneath player. If you go back a few years, I just I think the Ravens have, if they're trying to figure out how can this pass rush be better, I think finding more opportunities for the stunt would be a great place to start, given how successful it's been. All right, let me move on. Simulated pressure 5 times in this game, 2.8 yards per play. They continue to do that effectively enough. They had a little bit of everything in this game: 1 sack, 1 quarterback hit, 1 pressure, 1 pass defense at the line of scrimmage, and 1 ball out quick. Which, if you're going to spread your plays out with that, you're going to do pretty well. Most of those are very positive results. And then 2+ elements. They had 5 plays of that type, 6.6 yards per play. Wasn't special as a group. Obviously, a lot of them had blitzes involved, so they tend to be from the group where they weren't playing as well. 2 guys really stood out in terms of the pass rush in terms of their days. Travis Jones and Mike Green each had 5 different contributions to pressures as I scored it. So we'll get into, I'm sure, each of those a little bit later, but I'm not Travis Jones, Draymond Jones. Draymond Jones. So Draymond had a sack -8, half a sack -8, 1.5 pressures, and a pressure pass defense. Let me start with the 1.5 sacks. Anything to say about that?
In what sense?
Oh, I'm sorry. We've been talking about this a little bit, so I thought maybe you kind of caught on. Draymond Jones was traded to the Ravens with a condition on the draft pick
Oh, yeah,
that it
yeah.
would go up from a 5th to a 4th if both of 2 things happens. He gets at least 2 sacks, and the Ravens make the playoffs. And so now he could have gotten 2 sacks in this game, but he got 1.5, and the second one was ruled. The second one or the first one, whichever one, was ruled as a shared sack with Taven Bryan. That I think the NFL or the Titans may want the NFL to look at.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously, from a drafting perspective, you'd rather that be a 5th instead of a 4th. But if it means the Ravens are getting to the playoffs and have a more disruptive pass rusher along the way, then I'll take that trade off.
Sure, and he's been great, so it's not like he's not going to be worth it. At least I can't see that he wouldn't be worth it. But if I were to, what's the total number of sacks that you want from this point to be perfectly happy about the fact that they're upgrading a 5th to a 4th?
I would probably want to see a total of like 5 sacks, honestly.
5 sacks. Okay, I was going to say 4, but I'll take 5. Okay.
I mean, in the ideal world, that means he's coming in for half a season and basically giving you, half a season's worth of sacks of a high end like pass rush production. So
Yeah.
that would be nice. I think he might get there.
Okay, yeah, that would be exciting. That'd be terrific. I certainly wouldn't have any problem with the upgrade the pick if that were the case. And I think the Ravens probably would make the playoffs if they got that out of Draymond Jones. It would increase their chance. Then Mike Green, he had 1 sack for -2 where he kind of tripped up. I don't know if you saw the film from me, but he really tripped up Taylor more than he actually took him down with his arms.
Yeah.
It took him down with his left foot, it looked like. So that didn't look that good, but he also missed out on another sack and a half with missed tackles in this game. So he could have had 2.5 sacks.
Yeah, because there's the one where Jones kind of had Taylor by
Yep.
the ankle and Green had him kind of dead to rights and just kind of missed
Whiffed. He went
missed
right
on
over the
it.
top. Yeah.
But yeah, he was very active in this game, very impressive. I think his best game as a Raven. So it was really nice to see him, consistently be that nuisance off the edge.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I thought he had a fantastic game. So, well, let's talk about some individual players. You're the guest. Who would you like to talk about first?
Whew. Let's start with Travis Jones. I mean, he's kind of been the Ravens kind of like rock all season. doesn't always show up in the stat sheets. Some of the times he's had a couple of like splash games where you'll have 4, 5, 6 pressures. Um, he didn't get as much of a pass rush in this game, but his ability to just be that stout run defender really helped, allow the Ravens to have that good game, stopping Brees Hall, and the Jets running ground attack. So I feel like he's played a ton of snaps for the Ravens this year. He's been really an Ironman for them, and I think one of the reasons why the defense has been able to kind of turn around is his solid play game in, game out up the middle. And what he can do in certain situations as a pass rusher is also, impressive. When he gets that one-on-one, he can definitely just take the defender right back into the lap of the quarterback. And it's exactly what you would want us to have from your nose tackle / three technique.
Yeah. There's several players on the Ravens who do not seem to be they can't lose them defensively, or they just be cooked. And obviously one is Wiggins. They don't really seem to have enough replacements at the outside corner to really make that work at this point. You can't lose Roquan. I don't think we've already been without Roquan. We've seen what happened.
Yeah.
The defense kind of loses its glue in a lot of ways in terms of how it's put together. And Roquan he's just a good first man to the ball. He's not a trail player. He's a lead player. And he's exactly what you want out of your Mike linebacker. And then Travis Jones, they have leaned on him in a way that is beyond normal for your star nose tackle. The only comparable player really in Ravens history is Haloti Ngata that's ever been leaned on in the same way for as much as Travis Jones did. But Travis Jones is in there on every pass play now. He's in there on every dime snap as their single defensive lineman. So he's just central to this team. And then of course, team can't do it without Kyle Hamilton because he's the other element of the glue that holds the defense together. And hopefully they won't be without him on Thursday night.
Yeah, it really is a team that's kind of built up the middle. The spine of the defense. It's Roquan, it's Travis Jones, it's Kyle Hamilton. Those are your key players. I mean, you could maybe throw Wiggins in that conversation as someone who's really key to their success down in and down out. But I feel like you can get away potentially with a different cornerback rotation if you had to. When you take away those pieces up the middle, it really all starts to kind of fall apart.
Yep. I'd agree with you on that. Let's move on. Well, maybe we talk about Draymond Jones since we've been enjoying what he's done here. Obviously, we just talked about the sacks. He's had lots of pressures, just generally speaking. I've liked what Draymond has done at a high level against the run. I've been perfectly happy with what he's done. I don't think he's the ideal edge setter, and the Ravens aren't really using him on all that many early downs. They're using him on some. But he's rotational, and they're trying to get a Jabbo in there to replace him on some early downs. And they're really trying to save Draymond for more obvious passing downs. So they haven't been able to do that with everybody to the degree they want because they have basically 4 outside linebackers. They have probably 4 guys who would do better as situational pass rushers. But, somebody's got to play the early downs. So they don't have Tavius Robinson anymore to do that. Draymond has just provided all sorts of value getting in on the quarterback, getting into that cone and creating problems for especially a lot of the quarterbacks they played for the last few weeks who haven't been all that great. Fits the Ravens need well. And he's been, an outstanding trade deadline acquisition.
Yeah, and I think as soon as he was acquired, one of the things that the Ravens said was, or I guess that Zach Orr said was, they're going to use him at different alignments. They're going to line him up at defensive tackle if they think it's going to be a good matchup. They're going to line him up on the outside, and they've done that to a certain extent. But I would say the majority of what he's done has been from the outside linebacker position or from like the edge position. He's been lined a few times, kind of over the center, over the guard, but most of his his pass rush snaps I think have come off the edge, and it's something that he's shown that he can consistently generate a decent pass rush from. And it's good to have that flexibility. They Ravens kind of were starving for that. They haven't had that really the past couple of years as much as they had in the past. And I think it's something that allows them to use, so one of the, we talked about the package, I think in the first episode about, that three outside linebacker package, and
Hmm.
having someone like Jones flexibility to line up over the guard, or over the center, or wherever they feel like he's getting his best matchup. It allows them to kind of get that nice pass rush with three outside linebackers out there.
Yeah, it's a big advantage. They probably do better with that than they do with having Simpson out there as a roving pass rusher, which is really kind of the other option. Um, Either way, you can either get three outside linebackers on the field, or you can have an extra inside linebacker with two outside linebackers. I think you do better having an outside linebacker kick inside than having Simpson run around and try and pick a gap. But they've done, it's not like they haven't done all right with both. But I prefer the three outside linebacker look, certainly. I think it's your turn. We just talked about Draymond. Who's your next guy?
Yeah. Let's take a few minutes and talk about Kyle Hamilton, 'cause I know that's something you wanted to do. He's been I'm not sure how much more there is to say in terms of like just what his impact is. I think clearly it's been something that everybody is aware of. There was that shift in how they used Hamilton. They brought in Gilman. Hamilton shifted down into the box into more of a slot player. And I personally feel like calling him a slot corner is not really doing it justice, because he's more than just a slot corner. He lines up all across the defensive line. He's lined up as defensive tackle. He's lined up as inside linebacker. He's lined up as outside linebacker. He's lined up as a standard, more regular slot corner. Strong safety, like whatever position on the defensive line that exists, he's played there, or on the defense, he's played there. Not only has he played there, he's played excellently there. He's done everything you could ask him to do: rush the passer, play against the run. Um, when he's off the ball, he's always getting his way to the ball. He's finding his way to the ball carrier. Teams haven't been able to really use those kind of like screen passes to the wide receiver, like passes
Yeah.
to the flats, like they used to, because Hamilton blows them up. He gets there before the blocks can be set, and those plays just don't work against the Ravens anymore. He eliminates them because of how fast he is, how aware he is of what's going on around him. Um, you know, he's turned into an excellent pass rusher. I mean, he knows how to use his length, how to use his quickness, how to defeat blocks. There was that spin move I think you mentioned earlier
Yep.
against Cleveland, where he just completely made the running back whiff on his block. It's just incredible level of skillfulness that he's shown, and it's hard to imagine what the Ravens would do without him. And we've talked about that a little bit. If he can't play in this coming game, like what they would try to do to replace him. You can't replace him. You just have to hope that you can kind of like get enough pieces that kind of work in the same ways. But it's not going to be anything close to what he brings.
I agree with everything you said, by the way. And I want to start off by saying what you talk about the strong side of the football field and the desire screens, by the way, by their nature, in a 3-by-1 typical 11 personnel set, you're going to have three of your receiving options, including a tight end, a slot receiver, and the outside receiver to one side. And you're going to have usually your X receiver on the other side, who is taking up the space budget, as I call it, for your offense. You're taking up a sizable portion, and you have more opportunities to run routes and single somebody up. So anyway, on that strong side of the field, Hamilton takes that away. And it's something I've just loved. And you mentioned it here. The thing that really gets about blocks being set, blocks can be set up all they want against Kyle Hamilton. He's too long to be blocked easily by anyone on the outside. In fact, he's really too long to be blocked by most players on the inside. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But blocks almost don't exist because of how quickly he can shed them moving to the outside. So you rarely see a play that's run to the strong side where Hamilton isn't at least a central player forcing that play in some way. Okay, he might miss a tackle, and that's going to occasionally happen to any player, but he's going to typically be somewhere near the ball carrier, either forcing him into a tackle somewhere, forcing him out of bounds, forcing him back to the inside on some plays. He's absolutely central. He's always around the ball, and that's great. Here's the big thing I've been noticing the last 2 to 3 weeks now is that Hamilton, they've used him as a pass rusher, and the other teams have no answer for him, and we're thrilled about it. And a lot of that, remember, we saw previously, 23, right? He had 3 sacks and a half against the Colts, right?
Colts, yep.
And they got 7 sacks out of their slot corners that year, which was pretty freaking cool, frankly. But we've seen Hamilton's quickness be too much for defensive linemen, for running backs and whatnot. But I'm seeing something that's much different in these last 3 games. And that is he's playing with absurd amounts of leverage, and he's fearless with it. So he can bull much bigger players. And take a look. I'll give you time references if you want to just DM me on Twitter. I'll give them to you, or I may even put them out with this episode. Take a look at players. Actually, don't go to my article. It's in the article. I put time references in there already, Devin. But there's multiple cases where he takes a bigger man, sometimes a tight end, but oftentimes an offensive tackle. And he knows how to use his length and get leverage such that he can bull that player. It should not happen. It never happens. And the only guys who are able to out leverage other players with that kind of a size disadvantage are the most elite pass rushers in the NFL. They're 240-pound guys who can bull a 320-pound guy because they know exactly how to get under their pads to get the leverage that they need to do it. And Hamilton could do it. And it's largely a length consideration. So we're back to, why does it matter if the offensive tackles have long arms? To defend against Kyle Hamilton might be part of the reason. but one of the worst things you could ever say about a pass rusher was that he looked like a wide receiver. It's part of the things. This guy doesn't look like a pass rusher. He looks like a wide receiver. And it's a kiss of death for any kind of college pass rusher. Do you remember Mabin from a few years ago? I think he was a Baltimore guy, in fact.
Aaron Mabin, yeah.
Yeah. And he went to he played for Buffalo and Miami, I think, at various times during his career, but he wasn't very effective, unfortunately, in the pros. He had that reputation. Kyle Hamilton looks like a wide receiver in a lot of ways. I mean, he has that kind of, long body type, the long arms. I mean, but he sure as hell can get to the pass rusher, and he is a damn fine bull rusher for who he is.
Yeah, it's remarkable the way he's learned how to play with leverage, like you said, to play with his quickness as well, to kind of use his. I mean, he can kind of like knife through gaps that shouldn't exist. It's just remarkable watching him play. He's never going to receive the award, I don't think, unless he had like a 10 interception season. But he really is playing at a defensive player of the year caliber, elite level, where the impact on the game on the Ravens defense is that outsized. I mean, he's not going to like get 15 sacks or 20 sacks like Myles Garrett, and maybe the impact is different, but there's things that Kyle Hamilton can do on a football field that Myles Garrett could never dream of doing. There's 2 different players, but the kind of flexibility that you have with a Kyle Hamilton, and the fact that he's fearless, the fact that he's consistently sacrificing his body, and that's something else we could talk about. The concerns about, the fact that he is, constantly getting hit, and we saw him come out with like the shoulder injury, something that he's been dealing with for several weeks now, and then unfortunately kind of the freak ankle injury where he just looked like he just landed wrong on and rolled his ankle. So I don't know how serious that is. We haven't heard any like significant updates about that yet. It didn't look like a severe ankle injury to me, but I'm not that kind of doctor. So I can't really comment on it, but he definitely seemed like he was upset when he came out, obviously like slamming his helmet down. So we'll see where that ends up, but and maybe he needs a week off anyway because of the shoulder, because that's been a recurring theme where he's looking like he's in incredible pain when he makes a tackle in the wrong way. So if taking a week off means getting him healthier for the rest of the season, then maybe that's a good trade-off to have.
Yeah. That's interesting, Gabe. I always wondered what would happen if somebody said, "Is there a doctor in the house?" And you go, "Well, I'm a PhD in molecular biology." Is that close enough?
Yeah, that's right.
You might be on a situation in a plane sometime where that might have to be close enough.
I
you
don't
get
know if
the
I
headset and then
I
have
could,
to.
do that kind of operation if need be,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
All right. All right. Well, anyway, Hamilton, obviously a very big deal if he plays this weekend. You picked him, right? How about we
Yeah.
going on to Mike Green? Because I know we both probably want to say more about him. Really fine game. There's one of the additional things I don't think we've mentioned so far about Green, because he was looking much more flexible. He's taking more fearless chances, I thought. And he's using something different that I hadn't seen before in terms of move I want to talk about. But first of all, let's talk about the opponents, because the Jets have drafted an offensive tackle in the first round each of the last 2 years, and they're there. Ola Fashanu is their left tackle, and he's good. And he's really ascending as well. Membu is their rookie right tackle, and he's good already as a rookie.
Yep.
So, you have two players who are really good, and that's where Green was getting a lot of his time here. He was using a new move where it's more of a power play where he puts his shoulder directly into the midsection after trying a half man move. So he goes to the half man move, usually the outside. Then he puts his left shoulder into the middle of the tackle's chest plate and drives him backwards towards the cone. Very effective with that move. I think there twice he put that over on Fasciano at the left tackle, who it seemed like to me Fasciano had a very tough game versus whatever the Ravens provided in terms of edge rushing. But actually, I looked at PFF's grade for him is pretty good from this game.
Yeah, I didn't look at the PFF grade specifically, so maybe it's just, like, over the course of the entire game, he felt like he had more wins than losses, but, um, yeah, I thought, Mike Green had a few really nice reps against him, just I mean, mentioned earlier, just the nature of how he wins on the edge is it's just a little bit different. He has that look of just what the high end pass rusher can do. He has the variety of moves like you mentioned. He has really excellent, I think, bend around the edge. It's not something that all pass rushers have. He has that. He has the speed. He can bull rush you. He can win on the inside, and he shows everything. Like he's not out there just kind of like doing the same thing every single time. He's run through the whole package, and he's just. I think I personally I see him gaining more confidence. I see him someone who's been given more opportunity, and I think that knows that he has this ability to kind of be an impactful player for the Ravens defense. And I hope to see him continue to grow because if he can kind of string these types of performances consistently game in, game out, the Ravens defense will have a different level that they can reach. I truly believe that.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a real. He's had a couple of games recently. The game against Minnesota was also excellent, but he's put together a really fine run here.
Um, I guess maybe one last guy I'll throw out there. We talked about two of the other outside linebackers. Let's hit the third one with Kyle Van Noy. I feel like he kind of had a slow start to the season. We mentioned that maybe he was playing too many snaps. He's being used more now in more of a pass rush specialist type role, and I think we're seeing a little bit more juice out of him. He's someone who's benefited, I think, in a lot of these kind of more designed pass rushes where he's someone who's coming on a loop or coming as delayed blitzer. Um, I think that's really what suits him at the stage of his career. He's had a few nice wins just off the edge as well. He still has a few old man tricks in his game, and I think if you can keep him at 20 to 30 reps per game, he's going to give you a solid effort every single night. And I'm glad that he's not being overtaxed at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he's played well in recent weeks since they've been able to add to the herd at outside linebacker. Not go into a game with three. It's borderline barbaric that they would do that, and expect the kind of snap count, have the kind of snap count expectations that would result in. He's done a lot of things well. They not being in there on rundowns, I think, is going to be a positive impact for him and maybe also for the Ravens in terms of using him most effectively. Let me ask you this: do you think there's a chance he could be back next year? Now, obviously, reported some bad blood this last year in terms of him not getting a new contract.
Um, I I kind of don't see it because I think the Ravens would probably prioritize bringing Draymond Jones back if they have the ability to bring in or bring back one of these players who's going to be coming off contract. I think they'd want to go with a younger player with potentially more upside. Um, but if that doesn't work out, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't write anything off. It depends on maybe how the season ends.
Okay, so Draymond internally, just want to look him up real quickly on OTC. OTC's valuation of him is about 14 million for this year. I don't know if he'll get a contract that's really anywhere close to that, but he is younger. He's 28 this year, so he's the kind of guy who could get paid this time around. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets something like 3 for 30 somewhere. I don't know if the Ravens can really afford to do that or not. They have a lot of other contract requirements. If if you're really thinking about it, I think if you're thinking the way I am, you'd rather have Travis Jones than him.
Yeah,
Yeah, certainly the same contract. You'd rather have Isaiah Likely than him.
that's a closer one.
Mm-hmm.
Likely hasn't shown the same ability this year that he had last year in the offense. Now the Ravens don't have a tight end on the roster next year, really, so they definitely need to think about that position. But whether that's Likely or whether that's Kolar and combination of other free agent or maybe bringing back Andrews on a cheaper deal. Um, I, I thought going into the season that Likely would be kind of like a lock to be a franchise tag at the end of the year, and then they'll try to negotiate something. I mean, reportedly there was a deal on the table for him already. I'm not sure if that's still there, but it was probably at a number that was a little bit higher than what I think he might be deserving of. But I'm not entirely sure what his market would be after kind of the up and down career he's had.
Right. I mean, I'd kind of be in the same position. I think people have seen some wonderful things from Likely, but the injuries this year have been tough, and I don't know if everybody's willing to just jump back out of that. He and Lamar just haven't seemed to be on the same page this year in the same way. So that's been kind of frustrating. But anyway, yeah, we were talking about Draymond and whether or not he'd be back in all this. Linderbaum, in terms of, okay, if it's Linderbaum at 20 or Draymond at 10, do you have a strong feeling of either one?
Oh, I take the pass rusher every day of the week,
Okay.
especially at half the price.
Yeah, I'm the same place on that. And that's maybe not a fair question, because maybe the real question is Linderbaum at 16 or Draymond at 10.
I I don't necessarily see Linderbaum signing for 16, to be completely honest. I know that some of the metrics don't like him very much. I know
Mm-hmm.
as a pass blocker, he's had his issues. I still think he's probably the best run blocking center in the league.
Yeah.
And that has a lot of value for the Ravens. And if you can get him to be average as a pass blocker, he's probably worthy of a top 3 center contract. And it'd be just the way that these contracts work. He might be a market setting contract.
One of the listeners passed me, I think I'm going to forget the guy's name and I don't want to say the wrong name, but one of them passed me Timo Riska's work from this year that shows that when you adjust for circumstance, and Timo Riska is head of R&D at PFF,
Mhm.
he has an N factor model, which says when you adjust for all these factors, what was his adjusted difficulty of his pass blocks. And Linderbaum's been extremely high, adjusted difficulty of his pass blocks. I don't think it has to do with the guards next to him. It's down and distance. It's the opponents. It's the fact he's faced a lot of big interior linemen. And when you adjust for that, he ends up being better than average among pass blockers, even in a year where he was 24th out of 32 last week of the guys who played 50% or more of the snaps. So right there, that would tell you that the PFF grades, while they're the basis of what Timo is doing, by the way, are maybe understating how valuable he is when you adjust for circumstance. So it's an interesting factor. It's one I'd certainly like to look at. The one thing that I couldn't get clarity on when Timo and I talked about his model a year or two ago, and it was in relation to Linderbaum too, by the way, at that time, was whether or not there was any overlapping elements within his N factor model. Like it's people may have heard this example from me before. It'd be easy to see that a first baseman might have twice as many home runs as the average other player, and your cleanup hitter might have twice as many home runs as your average other player, and your highest paid player on the team might have twice as many home runs per bat as your average other player. But it'd be a huge mistake to say somebody who was all three of those things, and there are a few of those in the league at least, would have 8 times as many home runs as your average player. And that's where I don't have clarity from him, whether it's been through some sort of principal component analysis that I'm sure some of you nerds out there understand a lot better than I do, because that's not really my end of the actuarial work. I had to have that, by the way, taught to me by one of our interns. I never learned it in school myself, but one of our interns taught me, and that was pretty cool. So,
Well, with Linderbaum, he's typically one of the players that the Ravens want to keep, right? First round pick has been generally a good player for them. They made the decision not to do the extension or the fifth round option, so they have to make the choice earlier. And they're going to have some flexibility in the cap, and I think they can make some adjustments to it as well with Lamar Jackson potentially if they need to. But they can't sign everybody, so it's going to be interesting how they make those decisions.
Yeah, and he'll be a very tough one. The guy who, when they were in a very tough cap situation after the 2001 season, it was a complete rebuild at that point, but they did have to let the number 10 overall pick walk, and that was Dwayne Starks, after he had 20 interceptions in 4 seasons, 20 or 21 in his Ravens career. So he'd been a very productive defensive back, and he wasn't very good after he left the Ravens. Honestly, he wasn't very good. It looked like it really worked out for Ozzie as a decision, but it's really rare that they've let a first round pick go. I guess a more recent example would be C.J. Mosley, right? They let him go for a lot of money.
C.J. Mosley, Ben Grubbs.
Mm-hmm.
There've been a couple, but for the most part, they definitely try to retain them.
So Ben Grubbs, they made a choice between him and Yanda in that year, and they fortunately made the correct choice between those.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Grubbs, played, I think, decently well.
Played well. Yeah.
But Yanda, obviously, Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Well, he will be. He should be.
All right. We're going to take a question. I just want to remind you, if you didn't check chat yet, Gabe, can you make me a 3-to-1 list for MVPs? Just so we're ready to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll come back to that in a minute. Want to go to the mailbag first of all. I got one question this week. I'll check again see if there's another. But AngeLove85 says, "Hi Ken, with Kyle hurt and seemingly missing Thursday, what's the best way to mitigate his absence?" Just a thought. And also says that Ajabo has not looked great and Lawson should be active. That's more of a comment. But how do you feel about the Ajabo thing? First of all, that you would prefer to have Lawson over Ajabo. We did kind of talk about it.
Yeah, we touched on it. For me, I kind of know what Ajabo is, and he's not something that's overly impressive. I would just like to see, they brought Lawson in for a reason. Obviously, that was before they traded for Jones. So, they didn't know exactly what was going to happen before the trade deadline. But they brought Lawson in. They kept him on the practice squad. I would just like to see what kind of, potential upside he would add to their outside linebacker rotation. And even if it's just like a 1-game sample and just see him out there, I feel like he's going to probably give you more on the aggregate than Ajabo. I've seen enough personally from Ajabo, so that's just my take on it. So I'm a little confused as to why they haven't at least activated him for 1 game, but obviously I'm not coaching, so.
So, and the other thing we mentioned earlier in the first episode was that Ajabo he's not an ideal situation for a run defender, but the Ravens really have 4 situational pass rushers. So every one of them it'd be better for them if they were a situational pass rusher, including Draymond and including, Mike Green, who's playing a ton of snaps right now. And they're all forced into a role where they have to play some early downs with the absence, or more early downs, let's put it that way, with the absence of Tavius Robinson, who would be out there, a huge percentage of downs if he were active. So anyway, the point is that Lawson for Ajabo doesn't really address that concern of giving you somebody who can take additional early downs.
I know I agree with that, but potentially he gives you a little bit more on the pass
Mhm.
rush side and allows you to rotate them more, and keep them fresher. It's a trade off, and maybe they just feel like Ujab is that much better as an early down run defender. Frankly, that's the way he's being used, so I hope that's why they're putting him out there. But I would just like to see what Lawson does. Maybe it'll be Thursday because he played for the Bengals and they
I was
want
thinking
to
the same
give him a,
thing.
a revenge game. We'll see.
Yeah. That would be a great way if they could motivate him in that way. And this is Joe Burrow. This is the quarterback you were supposed to be playing with before they traded you, kind of thing. Or actually, they might have let him walk in free agency, right, to the Jets. I don't
I
think
think it
they
was a
traded him.
walk situation. He
Yeah.
had a couple of really good years for
Mhm.
the Bengals, on his rookie contract.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, that would be nice if they could really get some value out of that with that game, because they got 2 games in 3 weeks against the Bengals, and Carl
And you
Lawson
just
is suddenly a force. Um, so we talked earlier about how you address the possibility of Kyle being out on Thursday, and a couple of different things. But what do you think is the most realistic way for them to make a change
yeah.
to solve it?
I I think the easiest solution is probably just doing a one for one for swapping Humphrey in, as kind of like your full-time slot player. He's done it in the past. He knows the role. He has some of the skills I think that allow him to excel there. It allows you to keep, two good outside corners playing outside with Awuzie and Wiggins, obviously. Um, I think it does limit you in certain ways because Humphrey can't do a one for one for how they use Hamilton. I don't think in terms of the way he moves around. But it allows them to at least kind of have a cohesive defensive unit. And as opposed to the alternative where you're kind of like having all kinds of different personnel packages, like weaving players in and out, to try and like micromanage the situation.
Mhm.
I feel like that might be harder to pull off. So, I mean, you could potentially use someone like a Trenton Simpson and have him lined up at outside linebacker at times and use him in pass rush situations, and you know, bring in obviously Humphrey in some situations, or if we talked about Keon Martin if he's available, have him out there. Um, so I think this is the best way is just to kind of use Humphrey there. It just makes it cleaner and makes it easier.
Okay, I'm totally with you using Humphrey as a one-for-one slot replacement for Hamilton. But then Hamilton didn't play exclusively slot. He also played the will linebacker in dime situations. So they've got to find a way to address that. And we addressed the possibility that, hey, that could be Humphrey too, and I'd be fine with that if they decided it. If they decide it's not it, how would you expect them to deal with that? Does it mean more snaps for Buchanan, more committed nickel? Does it mean they find somebody else to play dime? Maybe bring Gilman down, even put Keandre Jackson in on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's Martin available, I might have Martin as a fourth kind of corner, or
Mhm.
and that would be their their dime player. Um, and then at linebacker, keep Roquan in and have probably this. I think the ideal package is a single linebacker with Roquan. Then you have
Okay.
the three outside linebackers and Travis as kind of your five like box players.
When you're very typical situation where you have four receivers more or less at the line of scrimmage, meaning you don't have two guys in the backfield on third down, it's almost always what we would tag a 4-0-1, four guys standing with split feet at the line of scrimmage with one running back. That's most sets on third down in the NFL are that. Sometimes you have an inline tight end with their feet even at the line of scrimmage, but it's actually fairly rare. So if you have that typical, most typical situations, you can go ahead and you play a four corner dime and line up as if you're going to play man against those guys, whatever you decide to do from that, including rushing somebody off a slot player or whatever it might be. So I think those are both very reasonable possibilities. If I had to say what the Ravens will do, I think that they're more comfortable with a four corner dime, and so we're more likely to see slot being exactly as you named them, or possibly TJ Tampa instead would be
Mhm.
another possibility, and then Awuzie and Wiggins on the outside in those roles. And if I said what I really wanted to see, I want the one for one replacement of Humphrey for Hamilton. All right. Great question, Angela. I really appreciate you. And thanks for sending that in. Almost always has a contribution every week. All right. We're ready for the end of the show here. Let's talk about our MVPs from this game. Do you have your 3-1 list ready to go?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike Green at 3.
Okay.
We talked about him quite a bit, and I think he had a really nice impact as a pass rusher. He's good enough as a run defender. I think his ability to make an impact in the 4-man pass rush is something that the Ravens really need.
Yeah, he's my number one in this game. So I liked him a lot. What he brought to the pass rush was really special, and some of it is like what it'll mean in the future, and some of it was what he actually did in this game against a very talented left tackle, and some against a right tackle who's also very talented in Membu. For all the ways in which the Jets are bad, boy, do they have probably the NFL's best individual situation at offensive tackle of any team, just about. I mean, if two young guys are going to be with the team for 3 and 4 more years, respectively, because they're both first round picks, and they're both look like great players that are ascending and are going to be fantastic. So to have Mike Green beat those guys, I thought was really something special. He's my number one guy. I guess I move on to my number 3 guy right now, which is Draymond Jones. Great pressure game for Draymond. Like Green, not providing all that much in the run game. I thought Green did a pretty good job this game. A lot of it was making tackles that were forced to the inside, some by Kyle Hamilton, in fact, where he beat the tight end on the edge, forced the play inside, and Green and Jones are making tackle, or Green alone is making a tackle. Some positive things here, but I didn't really see Green as an edge setter in this game. And Draymond, that's the weakest form of his game. He shows up in a lot of our run notes as being blocked on the play when the other team has a win on a run play. But the guy's providing tons of pressure, and he was in there, and he had, it was at a partridge in a pear tree kind of list of pressure events in this game, starting with a sack and a half sack, and then he knocked down a pass at the line of scrimmage, and he had another pressure. It was a terrific game for Draymond here, and provided the Ravens exactly what they needed.
Yeah, I'm not going to add too much for that. I would just say he was been my number 2 MVP. I feel like he had the sacks. He was able to provide that consistent pressure you talked about. He wasn't billed as a run defender. It's not why the Ravens got him. That's never been a strength, despite the fact that he's a little bit on the larger side of outside linebacker. Maybe that's something that he can work on with some different coaching. But he's good enough. He's not like a zero there where he's getting bullied. I think obviously his impact on the game has been significant, and it's been a great addition to the team.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably my 2 guy is your 1 guy, but I have Kyle Hamilton there. So if he's your number 1 guy, talk about what you liked about him in this game. Not your number 1.
Yeah, I mean he will be my number 1. I feel like the way he's played over the past month, it's hard to have anybody else in the number 1 position because I mean I really do feel like he is playing at that kind of defensive player of the year caliber where he's just making plays all over the field in every single aspect against the run, against the pass, in coverage as a pass rusher. He's really doing it everything, and the Ravens are asking so much of him, and he's delivering. It's fun to watch. It's hard, trying to think about like who on the Ravens in the past, just like a single player on defense who's like, I'm just excited to see what he's doing on a play-by-play
Ed
basis.
Reed. Yeah.
It's Ed Reed, it's Ray Lewis, like early Ray Lewis. Like there haven't been a lot of players who kind of like just provide so much entertainment and just fun to watch as a singular player and what contributions they're making. Every single time the Ravens are on the screen, I'm watching 14 and seeing what he's doing. And it's just
Yeah.
it's just been incredible to see him.
That's a great point. I'm trying to remember any other player who kind of even fits that description. Terrell Suggs, the early days of, well, pretty much all the latter part of his career, because I started writing about the Ravens in 2006, and I started doing these individual notes shortly thereafter. And I would have all these notes about Terrell Suggs. And if anytime I'm aggregating the list of plays, Terrell Suggs would often have 12 in a game or something else, and the most anybody else would have would be 7, kind of thing. He had some of that, but he wasn't that ridiculously freakish as a pass rusher. I feel like the next guy who could fit this description is Mike Green. of anybody that's on the Ravens. So it's, in some sense, because it's new, Mike Green is the guy right now. I wish Malachi Starks were exactly that guy right now, but he's not. He's not that impactful that often enough, or that feared the way that Ed Reed was, that the other team just will never throw into his area.
Yeah, Hamilton is that's kind of a special player, and we're really lucky that the Ravens were able to get them where they did, and he's, I think, going to be an incredible player for a very long time in this league.
All right. Always great talking football with you, Gabe. Thanks for joining me for a couple hours here. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, Ken, it's great to come back on the show. I always love talking football, talking about the Ravens. You can find me on Twitter at Gabe Fergie. I'm pretty active tweeting during the game day, during the broadcast. I like to tweet my observations. Interact with other people. Feel free to at me if you want to bring me into your thoughts, and we can just have a nice conversation about what we're seeing and what we'd like to potentially see different, or what we're enjoying to watch. So yeah, hopefully we have a lot of fun games, important games coming up, and love to interact with anybody who wants to talk Ravens.
All right. Great stuff, Gabe. And it will always be worth having a conversation with Gabe. I can promise you that, if you want to include him. Other folks out there, thanks for all your very loyal listenership for this show. Make use of a hashtag Filmstudy mailbag if you can. And if it's not too much trouble, tell that one extra person about the show. We're going to figure out how to make more use of the algorithm, but the show has grown by people telling other people about the show. And I really appreciate that sort of growth anyway. Gabe, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks again for having me, Ken. Always a pleasure.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.